And welcome to the 12th episode of Host the Pro, where disruptive influencers talk about e-commerce marketing. Today we have Joris Bryon with us. Hey, Joris.
Hey, Rakefet. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
Great to be here, actually.
Great to have you here. Today we have an amazing topic to speak about. Just before that, let me introduce Joris. Joris is the founder and CEO of Dexter Agency and also the author of Kill Your Conversion Killers. Obviously, you can understand which topic we're going to speak about: conversion rate optimization on e-commerce websites. And specifically, we're going to dive deep into A/B testing, how to do it right, what's the things that you shouldn't do, and how can you leverage A/B testing to your business growth. So, Joris.
a lot to cover.
A lot to cover, definitely so. We're used to it on the Host the Pro. Like, getting things done.
All right, cool.
Okay, so let's start with that. I mean, basically what you're saying and what your job mainly is on conversion rate optimization, also email marketing, right?
Yeah.
You bought some traffic with so much money. Let me do something, worthwhile with this traffic.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you could look at it like we work with what you already have. So our specialty is really in you have traffic. Why not get more conversions out of that traffic? You have transactions. Why not get a higher average order value out of those conversions? And then you already have customers. So why not try and get them to come back and buy more from you? So you already have that in place. Instead of keep focusing on new traffic. No, work with what you already have. And there's definitely the potential for many companies, if you do this right, to double the business just by working on those three levers: conversion rate, average order value, and purchase frequency.
Yeah. And typically when clients start working with you, what would be the common mistakes you see on websites in terms of conversion rate?
Right. I think there's a lot of common mistakes, I'd say, but the most common mistake is probably the mindset and expectations from clients when they start working with us. And that is they don't really understand or grasp the whole concept of conversion optimization, because it is quite difficult. I mean, there's statistics, there's design, there's copywriting. There's a lot of aspects to it that you have to understand, and it's a weird combination of a specialty, but still you have to have a broad background and knowledge as well. So I think that's where it starts. It's very hard for people to wrap their heads around it, because it almost seems like hocus pocus. Is like, oh, let's change a tiny little thing and I see a huge impact on my conversion rate. How is that even possible? So there's even a lot of skepticism there. And I think one of the most common mistakes is really not following a good process and just trying randomly some stuff out. And it's like basically throwing spaghetti against the wall, hoping that it sticks, and you just set up an A/B test, but you don't even know if that's the test that you should be setting up. Because I remember a case where a client, they came to us and they were running A/B tests on product pages, and we started with doing the research, which we always do, and I just saw in Google Analytics that they had a huge drop off on one of their steps in the checkout, and like an abnormal drop off. So I was like, okay, if we calculate how much money they could be making if the drop off was at a normal level, because there's always some drop off on a checkout, sure. Then that represented 2 million a year, and so they were losing 2 million a year in a step in the checkout. Yet they were just randomly testing on product pages, and I think that's the most common mistake, apart from things that you see on a website. It's really the thought process and understanding how it works. That's the most common mistake I see when we work with clients.
Yeah, and not using intuition, but using actual data of your product.
Yeah. You can use your intuition if you can back it up with data. So intuition can be a good starting point, but for most people, that's where it ends. They're like, oh, I feel like maybe this is a good idea. And at best, they'll test it, but usually they'll just go ahead and implement it. And sometimes that'll cost them a lot of money without them even knowing it, because it seems like a tiny difference, but after a year, it really adds up to a big amount. So yeah.
Data
is a point.
Sometimes, I see also e-commerce owners, they don't love some kind of page on their funnel, and they're sure this is the page that just ruins everything. But it's really a lot of times counterintuitive, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, and counterintuitive, and a lot of people tend to believe in best practices, and I'm not a fan of the word best practices when it comes to conversion optimization, because it has those expectations that it's just the best practice. I prefer to call it like a common practice or a prototypical principle. Doesn't really mean that it is going to work for you. We've had many A/B tests where we tested a so-called best practice, and actually it lost the client money. So I mean, e-commerce entrepreneurs are. I love e-commerce entrepreneurs. They're like really entrepreneurial. They see opportunities, they go for it. But like any other entrepreneur, they're impatient and they want to take a shortcut. And unfortunately, there's no shortcut when it comes to CRO. And you have to do the research, and you have to A/B test, and that's how you grow steadily. Yet there's a lot of shortcuts, and then best practice seems like a shortcut, and then they implement something. And it's actually costing them money. So by being so impatient, that's a danger as well. Yeah, but it's in their nature. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur myself. I'm impatient. I make that mistake.
You're amazing. Don't take us through. Yes. So let's say I saw the funnel. I saw where the drop-offs are. What would be the right way to go about it in terms of A/B testing? What would be the right methodology to use?
Yeah, so I think there's one step in between, and so we've found where the problem is happening. The next thing you want to know is why is it happening. And what I notice a lot is that people tend to rely heavily on Google Analytics for answering that question as well. And Google Analytics can maybe give a partial explanation. Let's say you have a huge drop-off on a step in the funnel. Well, you could see that site speed is really low. It's like a really slow loading page. That could partially explain it. Or maybe you see you apply segments and you see on a certain browser version, you see a problem there, a huge problem, and so that means there's probably a bug. So yes, in those instances, it could be a problem. But in many cases, you're still looking at that page and again throwing spaghetti against the wall, like it might be this, it might be that. You're guessing and throwing a dart blindly and hoping that you'll hit a bullseye, but that's very unlikely to happen. So you have to understand why it's happening. So that's the step that I would place in between. And you could do some user testing, for instance. It really depends on the specific case, but user testing usually is a really great step in between to understand that why. And only then, when you understand the why, so you identify the problem on the page or problems, you come up with a hypothesis. So how am I going to solve that problem? That's your hypothesis, and then you basically set up that A/B test and you code that A/B test in your A/B testing tool and you run it long enough, and there's still a lot that can go wrong, and there's a lot of mistakes being made with A/B testing. But so from going you identify where the problems are, why there are a problem, and you decide basically on what kind of solutions you want to test, and then you set up the test. That's the right order of things.
And I would also add to that, split your factors. I mean, don't run A/B testing on multiple factors at once, right? If I'm thinking,
Absolutely.
I'm not going to change the headline, the sub-headline, the images, and the CTA color at once.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you bring it up, because that's a discussion we have many times. And again, entrepreneurs are impatient. They want to make a lot of changes because they think a big change is going to have a big impact. And yes, sometimes it does. But what usually happens is, so let's say you change a lot of elements at the same time, and it's inconclusive. So A and B perform the same. Then you're going to start wondering, like, yeah, but maybe if we just had changed the headline, maybe that would have been better. So you have to test it again, but separately. Even if it won that all those changes at once, you're going to be like, yeah, but maybe the headline was performing better, but those pictures were performing worse. So we could have squeezed more out of it so doubt will start creeping in anyway after a test where you change too many elements at once. So it's better to isolate all elements around a common hypothesis and test a hypothesis, and I could be changing a few elements at the same time because it's all under the same hypothesis, but don't change too much at the same time if you wanna test it. And that's a difficult message to give to entrepreneurs who wanna run fast. But it's important to keep in mind that those small changes can have sometimes a huge impact. Just changing 2 words sometimes. We've seen increases, like changing a call to action, just a call to action on a product page. We've seen huge increases, sometimes of 15% more and 15% by changing 2 words. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's
Not too bad then.
Yeah. Usually you got to do a lot more to increase 15% than just changing 2 words. So it's not because it's a small change that or just one tiny change that it's not going to make a big difference.
But sometimes things looks clear. Even we spoke about it's counterintuitive a lot of times, and it's true. But sometimes there is a huge drop off in a product page. We have a full a new version, a whole different concept to the page. Why not just pivot to another direction and go with it?
Yeah, I mean, in some cases that could be like if you're really confident from the research and you understand like, oh, we have so many problems here on this particular page, it might be an option to try a totally different approach, but it's really best if you lead by hypotheses, and you have to be really confident of what you saw in the research. And the bigger you are, the less I would recommend that approach, because too much change at once can have a really bad impact on your business as well. So I'd be pretty careful about that. It depends sometimes also if it's like a specific landing page that you created for campaigns. Yes, in the beginning, try different approaches. Say like, oh, we created one all around urgency, an entire landing page around urgency, another one entirely around scarcity, just to understand like which one of those principles are triggers for our customers. And if you learn that from it, you don't have to just apply that to landing page. If you know, oh, scarcity works better than urgency, well, we'll use those scarcity principles on other places as well. We'll test them there as well if they work as well. So you learn something from your customers and what matters to them and what really triggers them in their behavior.
Yeah, so true. And it kind of brings me to the next question of what do I do with A/B testing results? Because a lot of times it's like, okay, I see a winning version, let's go with this winning version and move on. But can I get more insights out of it?
Absolutely. And I notice you know a lot about A/B testing, because that's
I love A/B testing.
It's really a common mistake, like, oh yay, we found a winner, up, and we go to the next A/B testing ID that we have on our list. No, if you find a winner, that's great, because usually you'll find a follow-up winner somehow. Because first of all, if you've changed an element and you know that this actually worked, ask yourself the question like, oh, okay, is this the best possible version? Maybe there's even, based on the same hypothesis, maybe we can test something else, but around the same hypothesis, maybe there's even a better performing version. So that's one thing. And the second thing is like that example I just gave, like, how can we apply the same insight on other steps of the customer journey? Where can we actually use this? And it's not just about your site. If you know that like urgency works best on a landing page, think of, oh, maybe in my email campaigns, I'm not really using a lot of urgency principles. So maybe I should add that in there as well. So just think of your marketing in general as well, because you learn what works for your customer and really influences their behavior. So you might as well think of using that in other areas as well.
Yeah, and there are so many valuable insights there, right? I mean, we ran a few A/B testing on different parts of the funnels, and it took me around, I think, a little bit less than 2 months to realize like what my audience really loves seeing and hearing. Just to give you a few examples, yes, I'm talking about you. They love seeing faces of our experts along with graphs showing results and how they obviously improve throughout the time. And then I have clarity in terms of the process. What am I actually going to get? Not like big words like grow your business. And the fact that we're using a lot of technology. The AI-powered algorithm and stuff like that really worked and made sense in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can use that in your campaigns as well. It's not just on your website. If you know that AI-powered, that's important, then just use it in all your creative. So it's so powerful. Don't just stop on at one idea. And I think another point, and maybe it's somewhat related to it. It's what I think is there's a lot of focus on finding winners, but I think there's sometimes not enough focus on the importance of A/B testing to prevent you from making big mistakes. And because there's, for instance, we had a client, and we started working with them. They had been comparing us with other agencies, and the first call they chose us, and in the first call we have, client says like, yeah, we don't have that kind of benefits part that you see on all e-commerce, like free shipping as of $50 and handmade in USA, that kind of stuff that you typically see on most e-commerce sites. It's a best practice. And one of the other agencies that we spoke with, they were like, "No, I just implemented. It's a best practice. Just go for it." We're like, "Nah, let's test it." And because I just want to make sure that what we're doing is actually making you money. And we tested it, and the result was very surprising, because they had a 99% probability of losing $1 million a year, and that's a best practice.
Wow.
And I think it's equally important I mean, A/B testing is not just about winners, but it's about preventing you from making mistakes that are very, very costly to your business. And you could argue like, yeah, but $1 million, they would have seen that. Well, that's $1 million over a year. They were doing around the time around 10, 11 million. So basically that means their conversion rate would have gone maybe from 1% to 0.9. Now, if that happens, you kind of discard it and think like, I see that happening in analytics. Maybe it's the weather changed, or there's a campaign that has influenced that, or I don't know. You'll look at external factors because you implemented something that you were sure that's making you more money, or at least not costing you money, because it's a best practice after all. And it cost. Yeah. It would go under the radar. I'm pretty sure that it would go under the radar, and so that's a lot of money that you're losing there. So it's super important to A/B test for that reason as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. Actually, that's an amazing story. I think everyone should really learn from that and not just implement things, especially when we're talking about big budgets that going into marketing and scaling businesses already.
Yep, absolutely.
What would be your best tip to an e-commerce business who's already scaling, already spending those tens of thousands of dollars on media each month? What would be your best tip to give them in terms of this is how you should do conversion optimization?
Yeah, I think it's following a process and not going about it randomly, because if you do it randomly, like putting up a few tests, and you'll give up pretty soon, your results will not be optimal, you'll run out of IDs, and really start with doing the research and follow the steps that I mean, explain everything in my book. If you can take my book and just implement it yourself step by step. And I think that's the most important thing, because yes, it'll take you some time up front to do the research, for instance. That takes a while, but you'll make up for that because you'll find a lot more winners as soon as you start A/B testing. I believe it was Visual Website Optimizer who did a study once, and what they found was that companies who ran A/B test programs just based out of just random IDs, they found that 1 out of every 7 tests produced a significant result. So they set up 7 tests, 6 out of 7, no difference between A and B, and the 7th test is a significant result. Could even be a significant loser, just a significant result, with a significant difference between A and B. Now, if you do this the right way, what you'll find typically is that you'll have a winner out of every 3 tests. So yes, you spend a bit of time up front, maybe a month or so doing the research, but second month when you start testing, you already make up for that. So it's really important to follow the process and take your time to do the research.
Yeah, worth the investment of time and money.
Absolutely, yeah.
Joris, it was an amazing interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great being here. Great talking to you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. And looking forward to our next time.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Toda raba.
Bye.